welcome to another episode of Start the Week with Wisdom. I'm your host, Bridget Burns with the University Innovation Alliance. Each week, we team up with Inside Higher Ed to share a voice in the field that we think you should be listening to, someone who we think is going to be able to provide perspective and inspiration, and we do it very positively on a Monday. That's why we call it Start the Week with Wisdom. Each week, Weekly Wisdom is sponsored by Mainstay, which is a student retention and engagement platform that helps institutions address challenges long before they actually even realize there's an issue, to provide personalized, scalable communication strategies. So some of the chatbots at many institutions you're familiar with, that is what Mainstay is. But they do far more than that. So by engaging students proactively, they're going to be able to help you preempt and address issues long before you know that you have them. And that's going to be really essential. That's why we try and talk about proactive advising, proactive interventions. So thanks to Mainstay. It is also, our podcast is sponsored by the Carnegie Corporation of New York. We are grateful for their generous support over the years. But first, I'm super excited to welcome Chancellor Jennifer Sobanet to the stage from the University of University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. So excited to have you on.
Thank you so much, Bridget. It's great to see you again. It's been a long time since I've seen you in person.
It has been. We first met, so just a little background is that Jennifer was she was at the University of Colorado, Denver from 2016 on. We met there where she was a UIA liaison and actually helped us get our work going with that campus. But most recently, she was the CU Denver Executive Vice Chancellor for Administration and Strategy. She had a range of roles throughout the years, but now we're so excited that she is the Chancellor at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. She's one of my 11 former liaisons who've gone on to President, Chancellor, and Provost roles. So thanks for being the star.
Thank you. It's really fun to be here.
So I wanted to first kick off by giving you a chance to share a bit about your background in particular. I think people are curious about, one, I think coming from the strategy and planning space and administration space is different. I think it's refreshing because as a chancellor, you're going to need to work on those kinds of things. Often we see a lot of very similar paths. I love that we're seeing a diversification of the paths to the presidency and the chancellorship. But I'm just curious if you can share kind of your story of how you got into this industry and this weird job.
Sure, happy to do so. And I started my career actually in the private sector. I studied economics and I studied business and finance and international studies. So a very different background than most people who have landed in this role, and spent time working internationally in management consulting, corporate finance, startup companies, kind of not your typical path to the chancellorship. But when I had the chance, which means I paid off my student loans, I was able to move into mission-driven work. And I found that what I wanted to do was work in higher education. And I came up the business path of higher education. So always on the business side. So budgeting, finance, administration. I understand deeply how to work with legislators and elected officials, and strategic planning, and really look at the university through a different lens than most people do. And I believe that using my business background can help universities right now. As we look at how we serve our students, we need to do so effectively and efficiently. And we need to understand all of our stakeholders and what they're expecting of us. And I think this business background has given me just a different lens to do that.
I 100% agree. I think it's a really refreshing. It's really refreshing to just have that perspective, because so much of the day-to-day is really much more nuts and bolts of like operating a multi-billion dollar footprinted organization, which is less about an academic discipline. In reality, it is much more about how do you take care of this many people? How do you take care of how do you plan ahead? How do you resource stabilization? All of the and because of the constant reaction to new challenges, I think it's a really refreshing background to have.
Thank you.
Nothing of a different one.
I was going to say there are different ways to come up and into these roles. And I think what the background that I have has allowed me to look through the lens of creativity and innovation. And I know, Bridget, you and I, that's how we met, was talking about creativity and innovation. And with all of the, with the extensive and accelerated change that's happening in the landscape of higher education these days, coming at our world through curiosity, through creativity, and through innovation is something that, from my background, I've been able to lean on, but also I feel like it's one of the most important things that we do in higher education. In fact, here at UCCS, just recently, we've launched our C3 innovation at UCCS, and it really builds on curiosity and creativity and our community here. And how can we elevate the work of our research, of our faculty, of our students in conjunction with our community? And that C3 innovation is a way for us to be able to really supercharge the purpose of the university here in Colorado Springs.
Great. So I want to shift to you and how you lead. And I'm interested in what has most, or who has most influenced your approach to leadership and your approach to leading, and just give us that kind of background on your perspective.
Sure, thank you. It's such a personal question, because leadership really comes from our values and our leads to our espousals and to our actions, but it first comes from our deeply rooted values. And I know that for me, that comes from my family, from my faith, from the way that I was raised. But I think that one of the things that I bring, given that my analytical background, I also bring, so I bring my brain and my head space to my leadership, but I also bring my heart space to my leadership. And that really comes from my family and from the way that I was raised. And I try to balance those two things as a leader. I don't have any specific one person that I would name has influenced me the most, because I've been very fortunate to have so many people that I could lean on and learn from. And I will say this, that's maybe different than others, and maybe it's just because I come from a different background, is I've had an executive coach throughout my life as a leader. And so for over 20 years now, I've had not the same executive coach, because I think we learn and change and grow. But a big part of that has been to really challenge me. I've always asked my coaches to help me learn and help me grow. And that only comes when we're being challenged as human beings. And I have always asked my coaches to see, like, where is that stretch point that I need to learn in this moment and allow myself to grow to be a better leader. And so while I've been very blessed to have so many people around me who have coached me and helped me, it's those professional executive coaches, I think, who I gave permission to them to push me a little bit harder than maybe a mentor or a friend or a teacher or somebody who might be a little bit too close to me and doesn't want to give me that extra push.
I love this. I love this conversation. So I firmly believe in executive coaching. I think it's weird that higher ed is not normalized this at senior leadership roles. We make the mistake time and time again. You are excellent as a researcher, as a scholar. You are fantastic in a discipline. And so now we're going to give you a job of managing people, which you've never been trained to do, managing budgets, which you've never been trained to do beyond perhaps your lab or your institute, and also stakeholder engagement and constituent engagement, when those stakeholders are not from your world or your discipline. It's wild to me. And then I also am curious just in general about your approach to that. Like, I believe that you should change executive coaches probably every 2 years, because you get kind of comfortable with them and you need them to keep pushing you. I'm just wondering if you have any other insights to share with folks, and also where you find executive coaching. That's one of the questions I've gotten from the audience.
Sure. My first executive coach actually came from the private sector, because I came up a non-traditional path into this role. And so I knew what I could experience and how I could get help through kind of my past. But I think one of the big things is finding an executive coach who meets you where you are in that moment. Because of course, the growth that I've had to have over the past 2 decades in higher education have been different. as I've learned and grown, but also the circumstances that I've been in. And finding that right match really it's not easy. And it's important to interview the different executive coaches. And what I always asked is that my supervisor is interacting with that executive coach. So it's actually a partnership between my supervisor, myself, and my executive coach, because oftentimes I can't see the things that I need to grow. That's obviously why I'm not sufficient or working well in that particular area. So I think it's that partnership between also somebody who cares enough about you, or in this case about me, that care to get an executive coach for me, help that executive coach help me grow and learn. I think there are different ways to find an executive coach. There's actually a lot of executive coaches right now working with nonprofits, working in higher education, as well as in the private sector. And it's even the executive search firms have access to executive coaches. That's an easy way to try and find them. But I think the best thing to do is interview multiple coaches before you choose which one suits you, because you're a different person every single time you're looking for a coach, and you're in a different headspace and heart space, and you'll need to find somebody who really connects up with you personally. I will say what it's allowed me to do is really pull out the heart space in my leadership capabilities and that human-centered side of leadership. Like you said, Bridget, I didn't actually come up through the academic disciplines, but I came up through a very analytical background of economics and finance and strategic planning and those areas. And so I have that analytical side. And what I learned that I needed to really grow and to dip into is the human side of me for my leadership skills. And so I go out of my way to bring forth the human-centered and the heart-centered side of leadership. And I think that when I think about my own leadership skills at this point, as a result of all of that work and that self-reflection and that growth, I really try to be a leader who brings curiosity to everything that I do, and be deeply curious, actually more curious than convinced. I look at courage as one of the most important things that we can do, because really, without courage, the wisdom and experiences that we have bear no fruit. And then finally, compassion, to bring compassion to my work as a leader. And that is something that I have really had a lot of self-reflection on, to bring that love and that compassion to the work that we do, because all of our work in higher education is people-centered work. And we have to bring that love for our fellow human beings into our work.
I love all of that. That's super, that's very helpful and great grounding. I also just love your approach to executive coaching in general. It's kind of wild to me, the idea of connecting your boss to your executive coach, because to some degree, they're almost like a therapist for work. And so, many times your executive coach, you're talking about your relationship with your boss and how to improve, how to work with your board better, things like that. So that's uniquely vulnerable, but it's a very smart move if you have the right relationship with your board chair to do that. So I think that's great. I did want to ask about your, the what got you here question, but in particular, I think too often when we're talking about higher ed, people think about we need to do, more for preparing students for careers. And people think when they talk about that, they think of it too narrowly. So I'm making a purposeful effort to ask people about the experience associated with your undergraduate time that best prepared you for your job, for your career success. Because one, I don't often get answers that are inside the classroom. I get a lot more texture and color about the activities on campus that also contribute. So I'm super curious about what you think is the unique thing that helped.
Gosh, I would say it was my entire undergraduate experience that was unique. And that's because I was fortunate enough to be a Jaeger Scholar at Marshall University. And that is still a special program. That's not just a scholarship program, but it's actually an entire kind of all-encompassing program to help students really reach their full potential. I was just so blessed to be a part of this cohort of students. There were 12 of us in the cohort. I was the third cohort of the Jaeger Scholars Program. And it was not only, tuition and fees and living expenses and a stipend, but it was our first 2 years were completely interdisciplinary. We didn't have your typical general education core courses that we took for the first 2 years. It was all interdisciplinary and all within our cohort. Sometimes we'd have 3 faculty in the classroom teaching us at the same time during different seminars and combining different coursework. And then our junior year, well, actually in between our sophomore and junior year, we had an experience where we went to Oxford University and actually learned and lived in the dorms and learned through the Dons, the faculty who taught us. And it was a very different way of learning. And then we were given the opportunity to study abroad in the language of the second language that we were learning. Mine was Spanish. And so I was able to study in Spain. And then I had an internship in Spain working in my language in between my junior and senior year. And then in my senior year, we were required to have an internship and experiential learning. Now, mind you, this was the late 80s and early 90s when I was doing this. And so this experience was just an extraordinary experience. And they let us go through this as a cohort. So we were learning from one another and the cohorts above us and below us as well. I will say this, Bridget, if you ask about like one specific unique moment, and this will tell you how old I am, part of the program was we were given a computer, a monitor, and a printer. And I will tell you, I was the only one in my residence hall who had any of that at that point in time. And I remember, and it was my sophomore year, that a bunch of us Jaeger scholars we were just a bunch of nerds, and I am very proud of that. But we were nerding out with our playing on the computer, and we figured out how to tap into what was called MUVAX, which was the original internet of Marshall University. And we taught ourselves how to send each other emails by literally programming, using MUVAX and programming our way into sending each other really silly, like, hi, it's Jennifer. That's all we figured out how to do was really simple things. And I just remember it just blew my mind that we could do that. We were still writing letters to mom and dad back home, and I'd get a letter from my grandma once a week. So this was something that I think, when I think about what you do, Bridget, to help us be really innovative and creative as we look at how higher education is changing and what we can do to better help our students in their student experience, but also in their learning and in the research that they do. I think that is one of those things that I hold on to that I think changed how I looked at the world. And now I wonder how our students are experiencing AI and how it's changing how they're going to look at the world.
I love that, because it really is the examples of these kinds of programs, because we're always trying to solve for this issue and then trying to come up with kind of a silver bullet solution. But actually, there have been plenty of things, if we can actually just, instead of trying to solve from scratch, we actually reflect by inviting the people who've already devoted their lives to higher ed to reflect on this idea of what were the things that actually helped. Because what we're hearing in terms of feedback from the students is not wrong. Like, the vast majority of them come to higher ed for a job. The classroom is a critical part of their awakening to their enrichment, their understanding and learning how to think in the world. But there are so many other key pieces here. I love the idea of the technology product suite as well, because it's little things like that that can be a barrier and make such a difference otherwise. I think this is a really great example.
Thank you. I will say too that when we think about higher ed for a job, I like to think about it as so much more than that. Here at CU, we like to say we teach our students how to think, not what to think. And I think that humanities have so much to do with that. And it's so important that we actually look at this as, it's not just a job that you get straight out of college, straight out of university, because we know that our students are going to have at least 7 different careers across their lifetimes. So it's like, how do we help our students understand who they are as a human and how they come out at this world really, and how do they learn how to think for themselves and approach this world through their own lens and be ready to be adaptable and agile, remain curious, keep wondering. That phrase, I wonder if, is the beginning of so many great things. And that's what I hope that our students at UCCS come out with, is that really innovative thinking and that ability to dig deep into the humanities that they've learned in their first 2 years, and then be able to apply that into their professional degrees, so that they can look at this world with wonder and curiosity and lead the innovations of our future.
I think that's so fabulous. So I'm curious about, thinking of life and career success, the chancellorship. So I knew you when you were at another institution and you were providing strategic direction and guidance and oversight for the administration and providing, direction to advise the chancellor. But, you can get close to that job and not really know what it's like. And I'm curious about reflecting back, what did you not understand? If you could reach back in time, be like, Jennifer, here's the thing. Here's what you're assuming is true and it's not true, or here's a way, here's something that's going to catch you off guard. What is that about the chancellor presidency that you can help give others that kind of intel?
Gosh, Bridget, you named it. I was close, always close, second, right there with the chancellor, right there with prior presidents. And I did not know really what the president or what the chancellor shoulders. It's that person is holding the university in their hands. And while it's incredibly important to have a fabulous team, and I have built a fabulous team here at UCCS, I do think that it goes back to really the leader, the person, myself. What I didn't realize is how important it was for me really to put my oxygen mask on first and take care of myself so that I can lead others and serve our students and our faculty and staff in the best way possible. For me, just to give you the example of where I learned this, is 8 weeks into my chancellorship, we had a very tragic incident on campus. And it turned out that one of our students and their friend was killed on our campus in our residence hall by another student. And actually 6 months after that, we had a violent murder of one of our most beloved faculty members. She was killed in her home. And then 5 months later, we had an accidental death of a father of one of the students. We had club sports, high school sports on campus, and inside of our track and field house, one of the students had an errant throw, and it killed the father of one of our students. So for me, in a stretch of 12 months, Bridget, I had to really dig deep and understand, how do I show up as a compassionate, loving, but strategic and thoughtful leader to our university. And I think what I found is that it comes back to being a very centered, calm, compassionate, thoughtful person. And that comes from what's in our hearts.
I really appreciate that background, because I think people can see the things that you have to respond to, but I don't think people often think about the human weight, the mental weight, I'm sure that you had those experiences happen that were incredibly difficult to not just process, but then it is very different to lead in the moment when you're processing a traumatic or terrible thing, because people are looking at you so it's almost like you have to cut your emotions. You have to race through the steps of processing or find a way to sideline your feelings anyway. And ask the question of what does this moment ask of me as a leader, which is very different than as a human. And that bifurcation, that separation is not something we teach people. And in fact, I think early on in our careers, we think that that's somehow a bad thing, that you're not being authentic, but you really have to deny your authenticity to some degree in this role.
I would just put a quick caveat on that, because I was fortunate enough to have the Lyda Hill Institute for Human Resilience, which is a research institute on our campus, who was able to help me through all of these. And I think addressing in the moment the personal side allowed me to show up as a better leader for the university. Instead of suppressing those emotions and those feelings, the Lyda Hill Institute for Human Resilience quickly connected me up with help. And actually the entire campus. Actually, to be honest, my second phone call that morning when it happened, first phone call, of course, was to my boss, the head of the CU system, because I knew we would need the resources. of the CU system to help us. But my second phone call was to the executive director, Chip and Knight of the Lyda Hill Institute for Human Resilience, because I knew we needed to come at this from a human lens. And he helped me learn that I needed to be handling the human side of me, that personal side, at the same time, so that actually I could show up better as a leader, because I was willing to do the work along the way as I was managing the impact on me of the trauma that we were all experiencing together. So these are hard things to talk about as leaders, because we often want to show up as strong and always capable. But it's important to me to normalize the fact that as leaders, we also need supports and help. And that's incredibly important.
That's super. So I'm sure others are very lucky if they have something, resources like that are similar, but it's also a good reminder to call on the resources of your institution. So that was just super, I think, helpful perspective about the reality and the gravity of these jobs, because especially how difficult they are to just do even on a good day. Like even on a day when you're meeting and celebrating a new win and getting to meet students, graduation day, those big days, even on those days, it's a hard job in 2025 to be an American higher education president or chancellor. I'm curious about the best advice as we wrap that someone has given you at any point in your career that you call upon. I'm curious about what that is and who gave it.
Wow. I would, that's such an interesting question, because I've cobbled together so many different pieces from people that have helped me grow and learn and show up. I think it's probably not a piece of advice. It's actually role modeling. And it's my father. I would go back to my father, who taught me to actively listen, incorporate what I'm hearing, bring love into everything that I do, and to show up just the very best that I can. And so it's very simple, but it's actually not that simple, and it's not that easy, because we often forget about the human side of ourselves and the human side of the people who are part of our organizations. And that's what my dad taught me. And he lived that throughout his entire life.
Well, that's a wonderful one. It's great. That's great, rock solid advice, but it's also great to have someone in your life who lives those and models that value. Thanks. So thank you so much for being here. This has been really lovely. I appreciate the chance to reconnect with you. I'm so proud of you and that you're doing that. Like, again, we have a selection of presidents and chancellors out in the field that I don't get to talk to very often, because they are not leading UIA campuses, but we are not any less excited or thrilled. And we have to figure out what the alumni program looks like to bring you into the fold. But I just wanted to thank you so much for sharing your perspective and wisdom today with this audience. And it's just really been a lovely delight to talk to you today.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to do this work. And I feel like we transform lives every day. And Bridget, you help us figure out how to do that. And I just appreciate all that I learned from you and from the University Innovation Alliance. And I just appreciate the support that you give to all of us in the field, because you're right. These are tough jobs, but they're the most important jobs that we can be doing right now. So thank you.
Great advice to end on. Thanks so much. All right. Take care.